internationally there's been found to have been catastrophic human impact, not just on environments but also the species that inhabit the globe. And large mammals have been a class of fauna that has been particularly affected by human activity. So the megafauna, for example, as well as being impacted by changing climate over the last 40,000 years, were also hunted by humans. And the cave bear is one of those megafauna species that lived in caves, in colonies in caves, which were directly, their extinction was directly attributed to human competition for those caves. More recently, we can look at bison in the US for an example of overexploitation of species. But also deer, 50% of deer species are threatened or extinct in the wild. Camels are either critically endangered or extinct in the wild where they come from. You know, they're wild in our deserts, but you don't find them running around in the Gulf country and stuff. They're all been domesticated and taken out of their natural environment. And a guy called Ripple wrote in 2015 that 60% of large mammals were at risk from human activity. So we're presently experiencing our 6th great extinction, but this time it's us. It's not an asteroid. It's not, a warming planet or anything. It's directly related to us. So why do I say kangaroos? In order to conserve kangaroos, we're supposed to understand everything about them. The systems have been put in place to look after kangaroos, so wild harvesting kangaroos, for example, in Australia is one of these things that we can do sustainably. And these ideas promote the use of biological resources within the capacity of the species to replace itself. That's what sustainability is all about, that you can do it forever. And there are definitions for this, but basically they boil down to if you shoot everything today, there won't be anything left for your grandchildren to shoot tomorrow. So don't do that. Okay? We're trying to look after things so that our grandchildren can also enjoy them, or shoot them if that's what your inclination is. So sustainable use generally allows the continued killing of wildlife in accordance with traditional cultural practices, so even threatened species like dugong and turtles and whales. But it also has recognition for the economic importance of the species. And a huge economic incentive, for example in trophy hunting, has given people the idea that you can kill animals in order to save them. So that nearly $500,000 there, they say, can be used to buy farms, support communities and all of that sort of thing, so that people are effectively now farming wild animals in order just to allow people to go in there and shoot them. But even with, so you need an enormous amount of information to do that. You should know about breeding rates and all of those sort of things. The species biology and ecology needs to be understood, what are their habitat requirements. If there needs to be, if there's decline, can we do adaptive management to manage that decline and recover species? But nonetheless, even with all of those sort of systems in place, there's still been pretty catastrophic declines. So the North Atlantic cod, they built this fleet and just kept building and building, and then they built a whole heap of boats because everyone was making so much money. But between this peak catch here and 1992, the population just disappeared, and by this point there were about 20,000 boats fishing them and no fish. So that's what happens when you're not really sort of looking at things properly. And there's also alternative viewpoints that contribute to this whole discussion. So the Japanese say that killing whales is important for science, but in the period 2005 to 2015, they'd only written 2 peer-reviewed papers in all that time, and they'd killed about 3,500 minke whales to produce those 2 papers. So that was challenged then in the international courts, and the international courts said that's not science, so they banned the whaling. The Japanese rejigged their proposal, and the international court still said it's still not science. Nonetheless, the Japanese continue on to hunt whales. So in Australia, we've got kangaroo shooting. It's the largest slaughter of terrestrial animals on the planet. And if you listen to the industry, they say that they only shoot the large males, but that's not large. It looks like a female. That's probably a male. But they're not particularly big. They're not all male. That was from 2013. They're shot for their skins and they're made into shoes. Very stylish shoes, I reckon. They're made into pet food. Looks like the same product is going into the same can. You know, they just changed the label at the factory. They're made for human consumption. And I keep hearing in the media and reading in scientific journals that there are more than there ever were. And this is used as a justification for killing them. Populations are exploding, they're a danger to motorists, they're a danger to the environment and other species. That's what you keep reading in all of these journals and things. But my job is to do wildlife survey work. And most of the landscapes I find myself in are things like this. So fertile farmland with cows and sheep and horses and stuff, land being gobbled up for subdivision, mining, other development. Everybody knows this sort of stuff. This is Meadow Flat. So where are the millions of kangaroos? You know, the last figure the government told us was 54 million kangaroos. I've been to Longreach. There's quite a few at Longreach, but all the kangaroos can't possibly be at Longreach. So looking into it in 2009 after they shot them on Mount Panorama here, I became interested in what looked like decline in the government data sets. So I just crunched all their data and was getting numbers out of 80 to 90% decline in that 10-year period up to 2010. And when I contacted the department about it and said, looks like decline, the lady in charge of kangaroo management actually said to me, it's drought. And we were in a meeting and I said, well, why are you still shooting them? 80, 90% seems bad. And she just sat there looking at me. She couldn't even answer the question. So as a sort of foundational aspect of science and scientific endeavour, you're supposed to test these assumptions. So the idea that kangaroos have necessarily increased since European settlement is just an assumption. Nobody's actually been able to prove that. So I started looking into how well the science underpinning all of this kangaroo sort of stuff actually stacked up. So that, you know, if the industry is going to say that they're a world-leading, sustainable sort of thing, let's break that down and really sort of check it out. So my thesis that I'm doing with the uni is basically looking at the manner in which they persist in the modern world. And for the purposes of this project I'm doing, the large kangaroos is two species of grey kangaroo, the eastern and western grey kangaroo, the red kangaroo and the wallaroo. So we only have the eastern grey kangaroo and the wallaroo around here. So establishing a valid baseline is a foundational concept in science. But nobody's really done it in Australia, which is really weird. But it has been done before. So in Tassie, in 1990, these guys called Barker and Corley collected all the records they could find of kangaroos and plotted them on Tasmania from historical accounts like journals and that sort of stuff. And then they looked at habitats and where kangaroos persisted, and they just found, well, these were the main areas they persisted, and these areas over here were then reintroductions that they re-established in the 1970s. And this grand total here suggested 90% decline in Tasmania, which doesn't sound like increase to me. It sounds like decrease. When it was first done in the 1970s, the guy who did it figured it was only 5.4% left at that time. So over the next 20 years, they managed to sort of double that population again in 20 years, and they gazetted a national park to conserve them in Tasmania specifically to conserve the species. They were the third most highest priority species identified in Tasmania at the time when they said this is really bad. But I'd sort of guessed that this was going on because I'd been reading a lot of journals just out of interest in the past anyway. And Thomas Mitchell, who came through Bathurst, had described forests swarming with them. And I don't see swarms of kangaroos anymore. And I travelled a bit. So I used this whole thing as an exercise to go back into all those historic journals and stuff. I mean, there's just a mass of it out there. Like, the internet is an amazing place. There's an explorers page on Project Gutenberg which just has all books and stuff that it's got downloaded. Trove has got thousands of articles. The 9 journals of the First Fleet are all at one click. There they are, 9 journals, amazing. But most of those guys were more interested in the floggings and hangings and stuff that were going on than recording the kangaroos. So it's just pretty brutal history out there. Art galleries and auction houses have pictures. Helen managed to find me a couple of beautiful old books. One from 1942, which actually described the extinction of the Tour Lake wallaby, as well as what happens when you set dogs on kangaroos. But I don't know how many. I've got 450 odd pages of extracted material out of these things, and from over thousands of references. I've got over 700 photos and paintings and all that sort of stuff. And it includes examples from the streets of Sydney. So the First Fleet surgeon, the First Fleet guys did not get far from Sydney. They were scared, very scary place. Kangaroos are very numerous here. We've shot a great many of them, you know, right at Circular Quay. So today, that's Circular Quay. Up there. So this is from 1788, one of the guys who painted it. I've just started rereading Sturt's account, and he describes how this town has been grown. He came here in 1820, end of 1827, early 1828, I think it was. And he says that the industry of the people is amazing. They basically built a town on the ruins of the forest. Place names are a giveaway. There's a Kangaroo Point at Botany Bay. There's hundreds. There's 450 places with reference to kangaroo and wallaroo names around Australia. So you can actually take those and put them onto a map and look and see if there are kangaroos now. Most of the place name ones are obviously now covered in houses. Other examples suggest range contractions of hundreds of kilometres. So Oxley travelled in 1818 and he collected red kangaroos east of the Warrumbungles in the Liverpool Plains. John Gould came across in 1838. He collected them on the Liverpool Plains as well, but he was already concerned by the 1840s that the settlers were wiping them out. Red kangaroos have contracted about 300 kilometres off their eastern distribution when Europeans arrived. Then you can plot the journeys. Some of the journals say we went 18 miles today in a northwesterly direction. Then they describe a hill, and you can find it all on Google Earth. So I've done a huge amount of just plotting these treks, amazing expeditions, and just extracting all of the descriptions of wildlife and kangaroos and Aboriginal people out of that and putting it into a database. And as well as occurrence, you also occasionally get records where they said there is nothing here, it's just a wasteland and these sort of things. Or we just didn't see kangaroos. But to place that into context, if you think about the Mitchell expedition, for example, he had over 20 people, he had teams of bullocks, horses, 200 sheep that they ate. They were shooting at everything they saw, they were shooting their guns to signal, they were shooting themselves accidentally. There was a couple of people who'd just gone and shot themselves on these expeditions, and the accounts of the people who survived are writing going, oh, he shot himself in the arm, it's looking really bad. 2 weeks later, he's in terrible pain, I don't think he's going to make the night, and that's the sort of end of them. So, like, an exploring party was incredibly noisy. It was like a shockwave, basically, when they went out there. It was, and some of them also talk about the Aboriginal people setting fires in front of them to stop them passing and chasing away the game and those sort of things. So, and Evans, for example, went all the way from Sydney to Jervis Bay and didn't mention a single animal of any kind. So I'm pretty sure there were animals between Sydney and Jervis Bay at that time. So yeah, it's interesting to look at the reasons for non-observation as well as looking at the observations as well. And as well as finding out where they were, you also find out what was done to them. So this is an example out of the 700 odd photos that I've got. This gentleman's cutting its tendon, and I found quite a few accounts of this way of going about them. You know, the dog's taken the front, somebody gets them by the tail and just slashes them across the back of the legs to bring them down. It was pretty nasty, and one of the accounts actually refers to the kangaroos as being mild-mannered murderers, but I look at the peaceful faces on these guys. They're so mild looking, but they're just doing a very sort of hard thing to that animal. And hunters, as well as, this was fun, this was just for fun that these guys were doing it, but as well as that, hunters were providing bushmeat to the early settlements. So Melbourne, for example, has this amazing account of a guy who was at Melbourne in the 1840s, and he reports killing about 2,000 kangaroos in about 2 years and just feeding them up the chain of these little meat markets that were around the outskirts of Melbourne. So he'd go and kill kangaroos, sell the meat, and they'd then upsell it and just feed it into town. But he was also saying in these accounts that everyone's doing it, and he really didn't like the fact that people did it for fun. He boasted about being able to get meat and skins off animals that somebody had just come through and killed them, and he found them and would skin them and not have to kill them himself. But there were so many kangaroos back in those days as well that they used to organise specific activities to get rid of them. So this is a pretty typical drive. They'd have a line of guys with guns, and they'd have men and horses and dogs come around and just push them out of the timber or onto these lines of people. These kids are loading for their fathers or whatever's going on. Masses of kangaroos in the trees over here. And they kept scores. You know, you can find Henry Brack's killed 94 on day X, all that sort of stuff. And over time they developed it into this sort of system of doing things. These fences here would sometimes run for 4 miles. These big wings out to a corral at the end. This is a group of kangaroos that's already been pushed in. And they'd just go out and roam around with their horses and push kangaroos in, and there's a guy down here closing the gate behind them. And they could fit 4,000 kangaroos into these spaces down here. And the accounts vary. Often they would just have men around the side that would shoot the big males because they were a bit scary. And then everyone would just jump over the thing with clubs and spears and swords, and it was truly horrific. Some of the accounts, one of the guys did it and he said, I raised my arm and slew until I couldn't raise my arm anymore. He came out covered in blood, blah, blah, blah. He said, I needed 3 fingers of rum to settle the nerves, and he said, I never went again. It was the first time I got invited, and I made sure I never went to another one. So it was pretty, you know, heaving bodies and blah, blah. It was just pretty awful stuff. By the 1870s, they started to look for government support. So bounties started being paid. Millions of scalps were handed in and paid for by the government as a program to make agriculture sort of more viable, because there were so many kangaroos. It was obviously a threat to agriculture. So it was very, very large scale removal of these animals. So I've taken all of these observations of where they are, how many there are and all those sort of things. And I've been putting them into Google Earth. Like this is Human Hovels Trek, this is Oxley, a couple of Oxley ones. Evans goes up here. I haven't done Mitchell because it's 2 massive volumes, huge job. But mostly what I've done is I've just pulled out the records and tried to figure out where they were. So a lot of these over here are Eyre, that's Sturt. I've got Western Australia with Giles and Gray and all these other sort of people. Hundreds and hundreds of records, and you're able to then do exactly what the guys in Tassie did. You can plot the kangaroo records, look at the habitat, and we'll be able to then generate a model for 1788 distribution of kangaroos, which somebody should have done before, but I'm having fun. Hundreds of hours I put here, at least hundreds of hours, but it's really enjoyable reading. So needless to say, things are pretty different from what I'm reading to what they are today. So this is Queen Charlotte's Vale in Bathurst. The Bathurst accounts from those times, Evans came, you can have kangaroo any time. Macquarie, the governor, came over in 1815. Great herds of kangaroos and flocks of emus. The Bathurst Plain was perfect kangaroo habitat for them. So even though this picture only has 3 of each, given that they were here for 8 million years doing their thing, great herds, hard to put a number on it, but obviously Bathurst has now some huddled on Mount Panorama, hiding from council. There's a group over at White Rock, there's a little group on the edge of Raglan, there's some in Boundary Road Reserve, but they're no longer everywhere. They're very much, you can put a fence around them basically and say this is where the kangaroos are, rather than it being the other way around and saying this is my little plot of corn or whatever, all the kangaroos are everywhere else. So it's changed a lot. So that's the first part. The second part of what I'm doing is looking at their ecology and biology and really sort of trying to see how that sits within the framework of the harvest management program for the species. So again, it's mostly been literature review, looking at hundreds and hundreds of scientific papers. Some of them are a bit dry, but some of them are quite interesting as well. To make a start, I was lucky enough that Hetty gave me like a whole stack of Australian wildlife management, which in the 70s and 80s had masses of papers being written about kangaroos. So that was just a fortunate chance that I was able to got all this and look for them. I'd see references in other papers and I can just go, oh, that's in that bracket that Hetty gave me. So that's really nice. But as well as that, there's been a few books that have tried to bring it all together. Some of them are like texts for anyone who deals with kangaroos, so Dawson and Shaw, Wally and Grigg. But mostly what those books that have been produced more recently seem to be doing is trying to sort of prop up this whole justification for the shooting of kangaroos. So they all, without an exception, they all say that there are more than there ever were. Farms have made things better for them, dams have increased their range, all of these sort of things. But contrary to all of those things, when you actually go and find the papers that break them down and look at the actual issues they're talking about, you find that dams haven't made things better for them. So they've done distribution studies on kangaroos and found that their distribution is not linked at all to the distribution of dams. They want trees, they want grass. Most of the water that they get by grazing in the early morning when there's dew on the grass. Instead of population explosions, populations grow slowly, so 10 to 13% per annum when things are good. They can only have one joey at a time. So this is a graphic that Helen made up, which basically shows the mortality of joeys. So a doe has sort of 8 or so years of breeding life. They don't have their first young until they're 3, they stop after they're 12. So they can have about 8 joeys. Of those 8 joeys, half of them are taken by foxes. 73% total juvenile mortality makes up for the other 2. So, you know, poor nutrition, fell out of the pouch and bumped its head. All of the things that happen to young joeys happen to these 2. Out of the remaining 2, when they look at joeys in the pouch of a kangaroo, half of them are male and half of them are female. So if you assume that these mortality factors are the same, a doe will only replace herself with one female kangaroo in her lifetime once. So it's very hard for a population to explode when there's such heavy mortality going on. So when you read about population explosions, and the data itself from the government has population explosions in it, you know, it'll double in 1 year. If their population growth rate is 10%, 100% growth rate is biologically impossible. So the people who are involved in this sort of justification for the government have come up with a whole heap of theories, and one of them that they talk about is, oh, they've come from somewhere else, you know, this mass migration they're talking about. But again, the studies show they're sedentary. They have a home range and they stay there their whole life unless you go and mess with them. And even when the population increases by 100%, every single zone increases. So if there was migration from somewhere else, other zones would have to be crashing, zones would be going up, it'd just be this total sort of flux going on in that population, which doesn't happen. They either all go up by millions of kangaroos in a year, or during drought, the data shows them just hitting the dirt, really nosediving steeply. So drought, 100% juvenile mortality. Every single one of the does loses every single joey. And during drought as well, shooting intensifies because there's no grass and there's no water, and the farmers look at that and say, it's kangaroos. So they shoot them even more during drought when they're not having young. So as a sustainable industry, it really doesn't sort of join the dots very well. We also hear that clearing has made things better for them, and dams and those sort of things, but as I said before, their preferred habitat is woodland and forest. Another study was done in 2005 which found that they rarely go more than 135 metres from the edge of woodland into a crop. 400 metres was the limit. So when you've got broad-scale clearing that has cleared tens of thousands of hectares in all directions, kangaroos go at the same time. They need the trees for shelter, particularly during extreme heat in the summer. So this is a combination of clearing, so you can see over there the line of trees. There were accounts from the 1970s of piles of burning mallee and piles of kangaroo carcasses, and I was fortunate enough to find this photo was put in an Australian Conservation Foundation paper that they wrote to the Australian government at the time, saying, because at the 1970s nobody was doing anything to stop kangaroo killing. It was just open, you just went for it, nobody cared. So there was a change in the 1970s, and that was when the Tasmanian stuff happened as well, where people started to say, hang on a second, maybe we should start regulating this industry. And that was, unfortunately, when the scientists got involved and started coming up with all these ideas and trying to explain it and create a sustainable harvest model, which they failed to do. And this sort of comes back to the first part of my thesis as well on the history stuff, because the early settlers actually identified clearing forests as a way of getting rid of kangaroos. So to have the modern discourse being that clearing forests made things better, when the historic discourse was clearing forests gets rid of kangaroos, again, I prefer to believe the people who were there at the time writing what was happening, because they were seeing it. Gould, Darwin, lots of people were saying kangaroos are getting wiped out by these processes, shooting and clearing. In 1995, the CSIRO did a study in Western Australia. They looked at nearly 500 woodland remnants, and they found that apart from the loss of the timber, the second most important thing that they found was that humans displaced kangaroos. So if there was a house near a remnant that they were looking at, there'd be nearly no kangaroos, or depleted kangaroos. So loss of habitat and human displacement are two primary sort of factors. And remnants less than 2 hectares in size had no kangaroos. So for everyone, a hectare is about 100 metres across and 200 metres long. So once you start getting really little fragmented pieces of bush left, the kangaroos are not enough for them to persist. Proliferation of artificial water points, I've said before, they've looked at the distribution. It's linked to timber and grass, not dams. But if you actually look at their adaptation of kangaroos to dry conditions, it doesn't actually make sense as a discussion in the first place, because they're arid adapted. They're more arid adapted than a camel. A red kangaroo can drink once a month. A euro never needs to drink if it's got good shade in its life. So even Gould was finding them on the tops of mountains, and he'd say, I've never seen one go to water. Mm-hmm. So these species, dams, make things better? No. What dams did was it brought stock animals out into those environments where the kangaroos were persisting. And they did that. So this is cattle, not kangaroos, that cause that damage. But if you went and spoke to this farmer about it, he'd say, oh no, the kangaroos have eaten all the grass. Without a shadow of a doubt, that's where the blame is apportioned. So this was Boulia in 2014 on my way to Mount Isa. And it was drought master cattle. So there were tanks, like not in this particular photo, but I could see off in the distance sometimes a windmill. And you'd just have cows under the trees for hundreds and hundreds of metres around it, and they roam out from that dam where they can drink their water, and they do this to the landscape around it. In Victoria in 1982, one of the grandfathers of kangaroo science, a guy called Gordon Grigg, did a study and found 85% of the agricultural regions in Victoria had no kangaroos left. So that was 85% decline through their study area. They only found red kangaroos in 2 national parks, in northwest Victoria at the time, and since then Wyperfeld no longer has red kangaroos. A paper was written in 2010 and it said grey kangaroos are the only species in Wyperfeld National Park, and it's like, well, 1982 there were red kangaroos there, so that's another sort of 50-kilometre range contraction out of Victoria for red kangaroos. And by the way, red kangaroos, there are records for them all the way down to the latitude of Melbourne. So that's most of Victoria, they're now just in the top corner, northwest corner. So they've been wiped out in Victoria. And Euros, the Wallaroo, is an endangered species in Victoria, which we have on Mount Panorama, the albino animals, the Wallaroos. They used to be right through Victoria, all the way. So they used to, the Australian Museum were killing them in the Melbourne water catchment in the 1960s. And I've got their records and it's like 250, 200, 150, 64, 7. Now there are none. So there's very crazy things that scientists have been doing with kangaroos. But instead of all of this sort of suggesting to people that kangaroos might be in trouble, we have this. So this is a graph that was produced by people who are proponents of the industry. And they say that this graph shows that the commercial shooting of kangaroos in Australia is sustainable because from the 1970s to the present day, the population's about the same. And this is pretty basic stuff. It just adds up the totals from all of the shooting states and puts them in a nice handy little graph. But what it doesn't do is take into account correction factors. So when people survey kangaroos, they know that they can't count them all, so they times it by a number. Between 1975 and 1980, that was determined by the CSIRO for red kangaroos. So this scale is, the dotted and dashed lines, the scale is over here. So this is number of kangaroos, this is correction factors. So in 1975 to 1980, correction factors on a 100 metre transect were for red kangaroos 1.8. Nowadays for red kangaroos it's nearly 4. There were no correction factors for grey kangaroos, but when they brought them in for grey kangaroos in 1980, it was about 3.5. For grey kangaroos it's now 6. But they also do a different sort of sized width of survey. So they actually now times kangaroos, depending on where they're doing it, by up to 13. So the population's the same, correction factors are increasing. So that means that the number they're counting is decreasing. Because to get these numbers, they're timesing these numbers by how many they see. So it's actually quite a telling graph, if you're into graphs, that really shows that this stable sort of distributional population that they like to tell us is stable can't be stable. They're timesing it by ridiculous. And Wallaroos in long reach, they times by 23. Count 1 times by 23, not particularly accurate. And as well as the correction factors, they don't explain that they keep adding numbers to it. So this is supposed to just be normal. But in 1991, they added 1 million kangaroos by expanding their zone up here. So that million in 1991 goes straight into that graph. 1991 goes up by 1 million. 2004 was 500,000. 2009 was another 1 million. That's just for New South Wales. And at the same time, these western zones, this big red blob here used to be the commercial harvest zone, which at the time was made to match the red kangaroos distribution. But what they've done over time, these things, they run along here in lines, 5 kilometre long lines, and count kangaroos. But they've stopped counting these eastern ones. So there's a whole heap of eastern transects that they've just stopped counting, like this area down here, there's just no kangaroos there, Deniliquin. I've got photos of them killing the kangaroos at Deniliquin. But their data for Deniliquin shows there are no kangaroos left at Deniliquin. They might be in a reserve somewhere, but not enough to count. In addition to correction factors and this sort of harvest stuff, they also fly over national parks. So this is Currawingi National Park in Queensland. Every other transect in Queensland, survey block, sorry, they're called. This line is called a transect. All of them together is called the Hungerford Survey Block. Every single other survey block in Queensland, the lines are evenly spaced. But because they obviously wanted this line to hit that long transect through the national park here, they've gone and dropped it, because you start at one. So they would have started at one and flown along going, oh yeah, okay, let's not fly along here. Hey, let's drop that one down a little bit and make sure we hit the national park. So they then use the kangaroos they count in the national park to generate densities which are applied to the surrounding farmland where they shoot them. So that's a bit dodgy, in my opinion.
It looks like they've done the same with the lower one too, haven't they? They've gone through the widest point just before it
I think that was just lucky.
Okay. They got lucky.
They just got lucky.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that gap there is weird.
Because if you move that back up, it's equidistant between
Yeah.
those other two, yeah.
So in summary, everything the science tells us about kangaroos is that European occupation accompanied by clearing and shooting was bad for them. Water holes, farming, all bad for them. Surveys, dodgy. And I think that has to be fixed. So I'm going to fix it. So what I'm doing with my study is to develop a stratified model for determining how many kangaroos there are. So one of the old kangaroo guys said in like 20 years ago, nobody's ever stratified this data. And basically what it looks at is, if you record kangaroos in woodland, you apply a density to woodland. If you apply to kangaroos in cropland, you apply that density to cropland. If you've got a national park and you've got kangaroos in a national park, you can apply those densities to national parks. And you actually split it all up instead of just lumping it all in a thing and smearing them out and saying the kangaroos in national parks and farms and everything. It just doesn't work. So I've put in a couple of freedom of information requests with the department because they're not particularly helpful. They've given me their flow and transects in a Word file. Try and figure that out. Fortunately, they're clever people at UTS who are figuring that out. But basically, by getting the flight paths, instead of just looking at where their transects are, because they say where they are, but when you compare them to their transects, the wind is blowing, so they're swerving off the line and up and down. So even with the altitude changes, which are all on here as well, I'm pretty sure there's altitude stuff. If not in there, then it's somewhere else. If you're going up higher and you're using these booms on the side of the plane and calling that a strip width, but you're higher, you're getting a wider strip. So there's all these sort of variables in the way that they do the survey which we're trying to nut out so that we can use their data from their transects on all of those lines. We can use their data to actually stratify their data rather than having to do it all ourselves again. And I've done 4 years of it, so these 4 years I've got from them, and I've processed that all that. And you can see from these that the numbers of kangaroos are going down. So the grey kangaroos badly. Number of goats is going up, so if there's anyone who wants to save the goat, they're looking good. Yeah, and as well as that, you can see this is the average per transect as well. So 5 down to 3, 5 down to less than 2. Goats, yeah, go to goat. They're going good. And as well as that, these transects here show how many they were present in. So in 2000 they were present on 52% of transects, this is red kangaroos. 2011 only present in 45% of transects. Now the converse of that is that they're absent from 55% of transects. Transects are 5 kilometres long, so over half of them are gone according to that figure. Grey kangaroos went from 75% gone, is exactly right. And that's just in that 1 year went from bad to terrible. And this is what I said to the lady at National Parks about. It's like, this is decline, and she said it's drought. It's like, well, surely you should give them a break. No, they haven't given them a break at all. And I've also plotted the density distribution. So 2000 versus 2010. This is red kangaroos. And this is the difference. So red is extreme decline, yellow is decline, blue is increase. There's no intense blue, there's this little blob, this one up here. But if you look at these, you can really see that there's a division, like the population is fragmenting through this major traffic corridor which goes through to Burke. And you can really see the decline out of the south as well. So down here, they're really disappearing. And for red kangaroos, there was one of the guys from the museum, Gerard Kreft, recorded shooting kangaroos at Mount Hope, which is way, way down here. And now red kangaroos are in Victoria, contained in an area about that big. So, not a good look.
It's an interesting insight that they're collecting all this data, right? Because you collect data so that you can actually analyse it and do something with it. But it looks like they're routinely collecting data but not actually doing anything with it.
No, and they don't really
You're
give
not
it to
making,
you.
you know,
Operational
or strategic decisions as a result. I mean, you know, it just seems
The data
like
is owned by private consultants, Hetty. This
Yeah.
isn't peer-reviewed science.
So,
no, but still, you collect data for a reason.
Yeah.
absolutely, and it's amazing data. When I asked for it, I wanted 20 years of it. They said no. And Dan, my supervisor, said, wow, they've never said no before. So that just shows how reluctant they are
Yeah.
to let anyone have it. And I just ended up saying, well, give me 4 years.
Yeah.
I still want to get, because I've got 2000, 2001, 2010, 2011. I want to get their first 2 years, and I want to get 91 and 90 and 91. So I've got bracketed pairs every decade.
Yeah.
And also doing this for grey kangaroos, but we haven't got it crunched yet. Oh, by the way, they've changed the survey methodology between then and then. So they're not direct comparisons, okay? But what it means is that in 2000, the best survey methodologies that they had said that kangaroos were absent from 44% and 48% of transects. Best surveys in 2000. And the best surveys in 2010 gave results of 56% absence for red kangaroos and 69% absence for grey kangaroos. So even though you can't directly use those and say, oh, that looks terrible, you can look at it and say these are the best surveys they had, and they both show decline, and the later survey shows much more extreme absence than previously. So they're not direct comparisons, but there's quite a bit of information in there. You've probably also heard that grey kangaroos were expanding in Western New South Wales, but the data for grey kangaroos, they're just about absent from that sort of western segment. So all the dams haven't helped them as much as they thought they would go, as much as they thought it was going to help them. So while wallaroos are listed as endangered in Victoria, they're not listed as endangered in New South Wales. And we're told that they're doing fine, but when you actually get their data, all these little zeros are zeros. So they don't even shoot this species commercially in New South Wales, but it's something that likes to live on hills and is very poor at dispersing. So they're radio-collared wallaroos, and females within 3 years are found within 400 metres of where they put the collar on them. Males are 900 metres, so they really don't roam around, they just live in the one place. And one of the early explorers was writing about them as well, not an explorer, he was a commentator, basically said that they're going to be susceptible to local extinction because of their sedentary habits. You know, if you go on a hill and shoot every single wallaroo, you know, they're not going to find their way back there because they don't go from there to there. They like to just live. So on Mount Panorama, that's where they are. grey kangaroos, this is this region again. So Bathurst is there, everyone, in case you're wondering. For red kangaroos, so this survey area, they said they didn't fly over national parks, and they did. So the actual report says it specifically on page 13, we didn't fly over national parks. I FOI'd them and said, can I please get your transect locations? 40% of their transects hit national parks. So this is Goulburn National Park. The biggest count of all was there, nearly 200 on a 5-kilometre transect in Goulburn National Park. Those 200, and after they count them there, they subtract the area of the national park because they don't shoot them in national parks, so you can't use that to calculate the population. I know this is convoluted, but basically they use the kangaroos from the national park to generate densities for farmland, and then they throw out the national park areas. And so they're basically concentrating the kangaroos from national parks into farmland. It's bizarre. Black is zeros, reds is less than 10% left. So Bathurst, you know, they're not gone here. We can still find kangaroos any day we want to. They're not extinct. I'm not saying they're extinct. I'm saying they're in decline. So all of these patches, this is Goulburn River, this is Burrendong, Keeveston, you know, they're all national parks and stuff. This is Windermere. Bylong Valley seems to be very, very poor. And I've been through there a couple of times. And it's, yeah, not even roadkill, which is really weird. You do hit them again when you get out of the top. Not literally, but they're lying on the side of the road. So what we have when you start stratifying their population, this is just a spatial stratification of it. You get a very different picture to what national parks are telling us. You get patchy distribution of seemingly high densities, but within a landscape of mostly less than 10%. So that's a concern for me. Blah. UTS have had this great idea that I also have to then test it. So what I'm doing is going out and putting out arrays of camera traps on a 1 kilometre grid. So those cameras are all 1 kilometre apart. So this is 1 kilometre gaps. And what you can do with the camera trap is, because it has a detection range and an angle that it can see, you can actually use that, to plot this triangle that comes out here, over there, and say how much that triangle is occupied by kangaroos, and you can then extrapolate that to the landscape and say this is a river red gum woodland on the edge of a lake, and it has kangaroos at this density on the basis of how many triggers you get, and you can actually calculate density using camera traps. So this property, for example, to stratify it, that's all very well, getting that. But to stratify it, we have in the property, we've got cropping, so 19,
Where is
18.
this property now?
This is near Condobolin. So you can get different values from each of the different cameras. This is Bimblebox, grassy woodland. This is cropland. This is cypress forest. So you can use the data from every single one of your cameras to generate densities for different types of land use, vegetation type, all that sort of stuff that gives you that detail to create a proper model for the species distribution. Out of all of these, this place here had bugger all kangaroos. I've also put them into like a nearly 2,000 hectare sanctuary. And still, in the cleared areas around the edge, there were cameras that got 0 kangaroos. I did get one camera that was sitting just in the right spot so that it got them laying down, like 50 kangaroos just lying down, Joey's getting out and doing all of that natural sort of relaxed behaviour. But it doesn't matter that there's 50 in that space because it still gets averaged out according to the different types of, like what is in that farm. So you can look at that 50, but another camera near it didn't get anywhere near that. So those values will still average out to provide a density for that unit, and it's only that one unit. So if you have one kangaroo and it likes that space, that's fine, because I've done it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, so it averages out as well. Yeah. So again, we'll be able to look at whether 10 is fantastic, and if a lot of cameras close to water points have increased values, then you might be able to figure out if water points are particularly important or not. So from other studies that have been done, I'm imagining it's going to be much more related to good cover and good grazing rather than water points. But it's all stuff that we can test with it all. So a few water points and stuff. And in addition to that, I'm doing that. So as I drive along, I'm looking for bones, I'm looking to identify kangaroos that have been run over. And you can see I'll come down this road here. Nothing, 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 boom, 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 lots and lots of kangaroos. And incidentally, kangaroos shot in this paddock here as well, just lying around dead. This is from my explorers study. This is just a snapshot of New South Wales. So you really see them start being hit in proximity to vegetation, not out in the cropping land, is basically what that's showing. Which was also shown by a paper in the 1980s by another kangaroo guy called Coulson. He mapped roadkill and he correlated that directly to the presence of vegetation near where they were getting run over. This one here kicked himself around in a circle for a while in the mud. I'm not finding them in wheat crops, so farmers say they destroy my crops. One of my cameras just sat there and the wheat was going like this. So it just 10,000 photos, clicking, 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 boom, boom, boom. One kangaroo in 3 weeks hopped past it. So, you know, it's very much again this scapegoat sort of thing that goes on. Sorry, I'm finding them caught in fences. Robert would remember that one. So this was a survey I did at Burke with Robert where we went out for 50 days in total. She's broken her wrist. Her legs will have suffered so much damage by this stage that she can't be recovered. The constriction up here kills the toes off. You know, she's a mess.
You get that here too, though.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Fence injuries everywhere.
Absolutely everywhere. Instead of plagues of them, I'm finding generally, you know, 20. Once, I think once on this whole property, I got 20 kangaroos in one spot. Mostly it's a mum and a babe and a young. There's another one here. But great herds, they're just not there. And they run away when they see me. You know, my vehicle turns up and the kangaroos are running. So they have learned. They know that humans are bad news. I'm finding the government surveys just aren't stacking up to what we should be expecting of them to be providing if we really want to look after our kangaroos. I've found an industry that calls itself sustainable, but their harvest model shoots kangaroos faster than they can breed, shoots them during drought when populations are in decline. They ignore roadkill, they ignore fence kill, drought, fire, flood, all ignored. The commercial industry and the model does not consider just normal farmers shooting, damage mitigation shooting, doesn't consider illegal shooting, doesn't consider climate change or just the decline that might be happening just because they're so depressed about how it's all going. And I'm finding the emus are getting pretty rare too. Seriously, emus are in big trouble. And Charles Darwin actually said of these two species when he came to Australia, he came to Bathurst and didn't see a kangaroo. And he specifically said that English dogs are killing the wildlife. Seriously, he said it may be long, but their doom is fixed. So why I'm interested in helping kangaroos and why I do the things I do is because I want to choose a different path. I want us to do better